3 insane true wilderness horror stories. Haunted woods that will chill you to the bone. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows through the twisted branches that mark the entrance to the forgotten Elmwood Forest. Legends whispered of chilling encounters that drove campers insane and turned the brave into trembling shadows of their former selves. A cloud of mystery hung thick in the air, a palpable tension that pricked at the skin and squeezed hearts tight. Those who dared to wander these woods spoke of disembodied voices and ghostly figures, specters that seemed to lurk just beyond the reach of their flashlight beams, a haunting echo of the past. Alice and her friends heard a rumor on their late-night road trip, a tale of a group of hikers who vanished without a trace, leaving only a single, blood-soaked backpack behind. As they nestled in their tents, the sharp snap of twigs echoed in the distance, each sound mingling with the rustle of leaves, setting their nerves on edge. The trees, gnarled and ancient, bent towards them like fingers reaching out from the shadows, the whispers of the long-lost hiking party calling silently for help. "Do you feel that?" Jake shivered, the hairs on his neck prickling as the wind picked up, sending a chill down his spine. The forest seemed alive, its breath cold and heavy against their faces. Every snap and flutter sent their imaginations racing. What if they weren't alone? What if something watched them from the darkness? Just then, a low groan rippled through the trees. They exchanged alarmed glances, hearts pounding like war drums. "Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. As the wind howled like a mournful ghost, Alice felt a sudden rush of dread, an intuition clawing at her gut. The whispers grew louder, weaving through the air like an unholy symphony, begging for attention. She fumbled with her flashlight, and the beam caught a fleeting glimpse of a figure, standing motionless among the trees. It was just a shadow, but it moved. No, it watched. The friends huddled closer, hearts racing like wild horses, suspended in a moment that felt suspended in time. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the depths of the forest, a sound so raw and frantic that it silenced their fears for a heartbeat. The world froze. They were not alone. The hunters had become the hunted. What waited beyond those trees? Would they become just another tale added to the mystery of Elmwood, or would they escape with their sanity intact? The night was young, and the woods stirred with secrets to uncover. The scream lingered in the air, a ghostly echo that seemed to meld with the very fabric of the forest. Alice's heart raced, blood pounding in her ears. What could make that sound? Fear gripped her as tightly as the tangled roots beneath their feet. Someone out there." Jake's voice cracked, panic making the syllables thicker. They all strained to hear, hoping for some sign that the scream had been just their imagination, a trick of the night, but there was only silence, thick and suffocating. "Let us get out of here," Claire suggested, her voice barely above a whisper. She shuffled backward, glancing over her shoulder, fear plastered across her face. Alice saw the weight of dread settle on her friends, but they had come for adventure. They were not going to let a scream dictate their fate. "We can't just leave," Alice insisted, trying to sound brave. "We need to find out what happened." The courage in her voice wavered, but curiosity clawed at her like a child tugging at a parent's shirt. Moments passed in uneasy silence before Jake spoke up. "Fine. How about we just take a quick look? If we find nothing, we'll head back." A reluctant agreement settled among them. Each took in a shaky breath, and as they gathered their flashlights, their beams sliced through the darkness like knives, illuminating the trees, but also revealing their own fears reflected back at them. Every crunch of leaves beneath their feet felt amplified. The rustling noise echoed ominously as they cautiously moved deeper into the darkness. The trees loomed overhead, casting a suffocating canopy that trapped the light. Each shadow seemed to come alive, shifting and sliding as they flowed through the thick underbrush. With every step, the whispering intensified, the voices blending into a layered cacophony. Faint words pricked at their ears. Just beyond comprehension, was it pleading? Threatening? Alice shook her head, trying to clear the apprehension pooling in her mind. Suddenly, a low growl rolled through the darkness, a guttural sound that curled around their spines. With a flick of her flashlight, Alice shone the beam around out of instinct. And then she saw it. Not too far from the path, a gnarled tree stood like a sentinel. Beneath it lay something dark, something that gleamed red under the flashlight's beam. Her throat tightened as she stumbled toward it, unable to look away, curiosity pulling her in like a tide. "Wait, Alice, don't!" Jake shouted, reaching out to stop her, but it was too late. She was already upon whatever that thing was, and then she froze. The source of the gleam became horrifyingly clear. A backpack, torn apart, the fabric stained dark with something sinister. The friends exchanged frantic glances. This was the same type that had belonged to those who disappeared in these woods. "What is this?" Claire gasped, her face pale, eyes almost bulging with fear. Shoes. Their shoes. One of them had been left behind, as if someone had been running for their life. Panic settled in. Were they stepping into a trap? Just then, as if summoned by their rising terror, the voices flared into an unsettling symphony of laughter and weeping, and a figure stepped into view, a silhouette framed by the trees. Too dark to make out, but ominous all the same. "Run," was all Alice could think, heart pounding furiously as she turned on her heel, adrenaline surging through her veins. But the forest had other plans. The shadows thickened, and the air seemed to weigh heavier. They sprinted, every rustle elbowing their fears to the forefront. But what if the thing behind them was their salvation or their doom? And as they fled, gasping and stumbling, a chilling thought seized Alice. What if this was just the beginning of a nightmare they were never meant to wake from? With every instinct screaming at her to survive, the chilling question echoed in her mind. What watches in the dark? The hunters were still on the prowl, and they had only opened the door to an unfathomable terror. Branches whipped against Alice's face as they raced through the forest, the shadows clawing at them as if desperate to hold on. Their breaths were ragged, hearts pounding in unison. Jake stumbled slightly, and Claire shot him a frantic glance, then turned her eyes back to the path ahead, willing herself not to look back. "Don't stop," Alice shouted, fear thrumming in her voice. They pushed deeper into the darkness, but the forest seemed to twist around them, the familiar trails morphing into a labyrinth of trees. The laughter, haunting and cruel, drowned out their footsteps. It echoed, moving around them, trapping them in a web of panic. It wasn't just the sound, it was like the laughter was alive, weaving itself into the very air they inhaled. Alice felt a shiver creep down her spine when she caught a glimpse of shadowy figures flitting behind the trees, just out of the range of her flashlight. "Are they following us?" Claire's voice was barely more than a whisper, her eyes wide with terror. "Shut up. Just run," Jake shouted back, but his own voice shook, betraying his panic. They ran on, each pounding footstep a drum of dread pulsing loudly in the silence of the forest. Suddenly, the branches opened up before them, revealing a small clearing. The pale moonlight cast an eerie glow around them, illuminating the harsh outlines of twisted roots and boulders. There was no ignoring the stillness. It felt too quiet, too expectant. "What do we do?" Claire's voice rose, a desperate plea. "Hide," Alice urged, scanning the area. Her flashlight flickered, illuminating a thick cluster of bushes. They dove behind it, huddled close together, trying to quell their hurried breaths. But then, a series of crashes shattered the silence. Heavy steps smashed through the underbrush, rhythmic and ominous. Hard in her throat, Alice peered out from behind the foliage, her eyes straining to see into the black void that enveloped the clearing. Something emerged from the shadows. A massive figure, hunched and monstrous, lurched into view. It wasn't just a shape. It was a silhouette of horror, outlined against the moonlight, and Alice felt bile rise in her throat. The thing moved with a predatory grace, breathing heavily as it scanned the area. "What is that?" Claire gasped, clutching Alice's arm tightly. Alice could barely respond. Every fiber in her body screamed to run again, but they were all too exposed. The creature paused, muscles tense, as if sensing them. It sniffed the air, and Alice stifled a gasp. Its eyes glinted, reflecting the light. The sight sent a bolt of icy dread through her. Numerous teeth glinted menacingly in the moonlight, long and sharp. It didn't belong in the woods. It wasn't an animal she recognized. Stay still. Please, Jake managed, his body trembling against hers as if it had heard him. The creature turned its head directly toward their hiding spot. For a moment, time froze. They could feel its sinister gaze digging right through the bushes, assessing them. Then, it snarled, a low rumble resonating through the air, making their skin crawl. Without thinking, Alice leapt up, grabbing Jake's hand, and bolted from the shadows. Claire followed closely, adrenaline spiking their speed. They raced back across the clearing, the primal urge to escape flooding every thought. Where are we going? Claire shouted, panic threading her voice. I don't know. Just keep running. Alice yelled back, her mind racing faster than her feet. Every instinct told her to find safety, but what lay ahead was just as treacherous as what they were leaving behind. As they plunged into another thicket, the shrieks and howls from the shadows deepened, a cacophony of despair intertwining with frantic laughter. The sensation of eyes watching them intensified, the forest alive with insidious intentions, but they couldn't stop. Not now. Not ever. Just up ahead, light flickered through the trees, a small glimmer of hope or a cruel mirage. They pushed towards it, thrashing through the underbrush, praying they weren't walking straight into the jaws of their doom. What if the light only heralded more danger? What if there was no way out of this nightmare? Alice's heart hammered as they approached the light, but a deeper dread settled in her chest. Was it a beacon of safety or another trap waiting to ensnare them? And as they reached the edge of the trees, their fate hung in the balance, darkened by the encroaching shadows. What awaited them beyond the clearing? The light was closer now, flickering like a candle in a storm, urging them on. The shadows massed behind, tight and suffocating, hungry for their hesitation. Alice led the charge, her legs pumping hard, every ounce of her will pouring into the escape. She broke free from the dense trees and into the clearing. The soft glow came from a small cabin, rickety and strange. The pale yellow light spilling from a single window cast ghostly shapes in the dirt. Is this a joke? Claire panted, her eyes darting around in frantic disbelief. Let us just get inside, Jake shouted, eyes wild. Alice sprinted toward the cabin, pulling the door hard, almost slamming it open. It creaked ominously, revealing an interior bathed in shadows. A table with mismatched chairs and a rusted stove filled the tight space. Dust motes danced in the air, and an old lantern glimmered weakly on the wall. They stumbled inside, slamming the door shut behind them. The thud echoed like a gunshot, sending a shockwave through Alice. They needed to barricade the entrance. Help me, quick, she shouted, shoving a chair against the door. Claire and Jake sprang into action, panic fueling their strength. They wedged the chair in place, breaths frantically mingling with the dust. What now? Claire's voice trembled, fear creeping through like vines. Maybe we can hide, Alice panted, glancing around. The shadows twisted under the sparse light, creating dark corners that seemed to pulse. They crowded behind the table, the weight of their fear sitting heavily on their shoulders. Outside, the laughter had returned, rising in manic crescendos that shook the cabin's walls. We can't stay here forever, Jake whispered, his voice barely a thread in the unsettling silence. A chill ran down Alice's spine. What if we get caught? She murmured, shaken to her core. Outside, a low growl echoed, almost a question. The sound was otherworldly, curling around their senses and tightening the grip of dread. Something pressed against the cabin walls. Did you hear that? Claire whispered, her voice cracking. Yes, Jake barely managed, eyes wide, darting from Alice to Claire. The door trembled under the weight of unseen forces, and the laughter grew louder, wrapping around them like chains. The window. Alice's heart raced as she thought of a way out. We can't wait for it to break in. We need to escape. Panic surged, and they rushed to the back of the cabin, finding another window, coated in grime, yet offering a glimpse of the dark woods beyond. We can climb out, Alice suggested, desperate but determined. With shaking hands, she pushed at the window, and it shuddered before giving way. Come on, she urged, glancing back at the door. The barrier held for now, but for how long? Claire hesitated, fear etched on her face. What if it's worse out there? We'll stick together. No matter what. Jake pledged, pushing Claire toward the window, determination igniting even as fear clutched at him. They scrambled through the opening just as a guttural roar erupted from the door, shaking the very cabin they sought refuge in. They tumbled onto the damp ground, hearts racing, breath labored. Alice steeled herself against the impending darkness, desperately scanning the forest. We need to find a way out fast. The woods loomed ominously, branches reaching toward them like claws. Shapes flitted in the periphery, shadows alive with malicious intent. They couldn't stay here. Not now. Suddenly, they heard it again, the laughter, but this time it felt different, almost familiar, and closer. "It knows we're out here," Alice whispered, dread tightening around her throat. But before they could move, someone stepped from the shadows, a figure they never thought they'd see again. "Guys, I found you." The voice spoke, thick with unshed tears and uncertainty. In that haunting moment of recognition, Alice's heart dropped. Had they truly escaped one nightmare only to step into another? And as they stood frozen, unprepared for the truth that lay ahead, the darkness closed in once more. Alice's heart raced as she took in the familiar form, her mind swirling in confusion. Claire and Jake froze beside her, fear and disbelief mingling in their eyes. The figure stepping out of the shadows was not someone they'd expected. The pale glow illuminated their face, revealing a mixture of relief and terror. "Jason?" Claire breathed, her voice barely a whisper, but the name hung heavy in the air. Jason, her brother, lost in the very woods they had tried to escape. He stepped closer, his hands outstretched almost as if he were afraid to touch them. "I thought you were gone. I thought I'd never find you." His voice cracked, relentless emotions spilling out. But there was something off about him, a flicker of fear that didn't quite match the relief in his eyes. "Where have you been?" Alice demanded, her mind racing with questions. "Running," he said, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting shadows to lurk just beyond their sight. "I can't stay in one place, it's coming for me." "Who is coming?" Jake questioned, shaking slightly, every instinct screaming for action. But Jason only shook his head, and Alice felt the air thicken with anxiety around them. She wanted to scream, to tell him they needed to leave right now, but words faltered in her throat. Instead, they stood together in the small clearing, the forest whispering around them. Suddenly, there was another sound, a rustling that made the hairs on Alice's arms stand up. The branches bent and swayed, as if something massive lurked just beyond the cover of leaves. "Please, we need to go," Jason urged, pulling them back into motion as he led them deeper into the dark woods, urgency underpinning every step. But Alice could feel the weight of uncertainty pressing down. Why had he been alone? What chased him through these woods? A flash of movement caught her eye, an outline darting between the trees. Her breath caught, the laughter echoing again, a haunting melody that sent shivers through her spine. It was following them, taunting them. "Faster," she urged, adrenaline firing through her veins. They sprinted through the muck and roots, fear propelling them forward. Shadows danced, slipping in between the trees, mocking their escape. With every pounding heartbeat, Jason stumbled, his breath coming in ragged gasps. I can't stay with us," Claire shouted, panic lacing her voice as she turned back to help him. But worry bloomed in Alice's chest. "Keep moving," Alice shouted, the need to escape overpowering every instinct to turn back. What if something had gotten to Jason? What if that laughter was part of the darkness that had consumed him? They pushed forward, hearts hammering against their ribs. The laughter swelled around them, echoing with a joyous madness, the darkness growing thicker, pressing against their bodies like water. A branch snapped behind them, sending a jolt of fear through Alice's core. She dared not look back, keeping her eyes fixed on the path ahead. But the shadows whispered, vowing revenge. And a sense of inevitability loomed like a storm cloud over their escape. Suddenly, Claire gasped. "What is that?" Ahead, in the gloom, a glow began to flicker past the trees, another light. But this one felt different. Instinctively, Alice recognized hope amidst despair. "Run for it," she urged, launching ahead as fast as her legs could carry her. Jason was right behind, but as they neared the light, another laugh echoed, deeper and darker, a promise of something that should never be. Before Alice reached the edge of the clearing, a dark shadow loomed, solid and swift, blocking her path. Freeze frames of their terrified faces hung in the air, and then the world exploded with chaos. The light flickered, revealing a form that made her blood run cold as the earth itself seemed to shake. "What is that?" Jake screamed, eyes wide as the truth twisted like a knife in her chest, ready to cut through any thread of hope. But in that moment of terror, Alice knew something far more sinister lurked within the woods than they had ever faced before as the darkness swallowed the last vestige of light. She braced herself for the truth they were about to uncover. Would they survive whatever haunted these woods, or would they become just another whisper in the night? The entity blocking Alice's path pulsated with a fierce energy, its shape shifting like mist in the air. As it drew closer, the cold seemed to seep into her bones, dragging her spirit down into an abyss of fear. The others, frozen in terror, shared her dread, their wide eyes reflecting the glow possessed by the form before them. "Run!" Jason shouted, breaking the spell for just a moment. They weren't standing in awe. They were at the edge of annihilation. With that command, chaos erupted. Alice turned on instinct, her feet pounding against the earth, heart thundering. She could hear Claire and Jake behind her, their breaths rasping like knives through the stillness. The laughter echoed, a cacophony pitilessly surrounding them, like grasping hands in the dark. "I can't leave him," Claire yelled, her voice strained. The attachment to her brother was palpable, but the pull of the darkness was strong, and Alice knew they had to keep moving. "Stay with me." Jason was panting, glancing back. The shadows were in motion, like predators stalking the wounded. Alice's mind raced. "What is happening? What did you bring back with you, Jason?" "I didn't bring it back. It was already here." He gasped, his face ashen. "I thought I was alone. I thought if I ran far enough." His words faded as the oppressive air thickened around them. Suddenly, another laugh reverberated, this one louder, more sinister, vibrating through the ground. The entity flashed in and out of sight, an undulating mass that seemed to laugh at their desperation. Alice felt it clawing at her sanity, the impossibility of escape tightening its hold. "We're going to die?" Jake screamed. His voice cracked under the weight of fear. "Stop it!" Alice shot back, the desperation in her voice unmistakable. "We can't give in to that. We need to keep moving. Follow the light," Jason urged, pointing to the soft glow that beckoned from deeper within the woods. It flickered, a beacon amidst the shadows. But as Alice sprinted forward, the darkness surged, flooding towards them like an angry wave. A guttural growl, like the roar of a wild animal, exploded through the silence. It sent tendrils of pure terror down her spine, paralyzing her for one brief moment. It was then that the shadows shifted, revealing a jagged, chiseled face with hollow eyes that glared into her soul. "What do you want?" she shouted, trying to gather her shattered courage. "Your fear," it whispered, an echo of countless lost voices merging into one. "You bring it willingly." Alice felt bile rise in her throat. Fear? This is what it fed on. Her inexplicable dread was their only weakness. "Run," she yelled again, forcing her legs to pump faster. They lunged toward the light, conviction igniting within her. The entity pursued like a thunderstorm, fierce and relentless. As they neared the light, the laughter grew shriller, folding into the dark tendrils like a broken promise. Alice could feel the chill wrapping tighter around her, but the glow was nearly within reach. Then, just as they thought they would break free from the shadow's grasp, the ground beneath their feet jerked violently, and they tumbled forward. Alice stumbled, the world spinning as she tumbled into the clearing. Claire fell beside her with a cry, and Jason crashed into a tree, the air rushing from his lungs. Lying on the ground, Alice gazed up at the light above them. It was blinding, yet it felt more like a trap than safety. What now?" Jake panted, fear etching into his features as he sat up. In that moment, Jason's plea echoed back to her. "I can't stay in one place, it's coming for me." As they regained their feet, the laughter choked the air, their own fears materializing into corporeal horrors just beyond the flickering light. Alice looked back one last time, pulse quickening, dread spiraling. And in that heartbeat, realization struck her: the woods cradled unspeakable truths, and the raw terror they faced was just a glimpse of what lay ahead. The laughter crescendoed, warping into monstrous howls, blending with the sound of snapping branches. They had not simply stumbled into a haunted place. They had awakened it. "Keep moving," Alice shouted, determination ringing through her voice. But as they pushed forward, the ground trembled again, heralding a new terror. What awaited them in the heart of the woods? And would they truly escape the darkness, or would it claim them one by one? Alice's heart raced as she stood, facing the swirling mass of shadows. The flickering light was all they had to guide them, but now it seemed fragile, teetering on the edge of extinguishment. The laughter morphed into ghastly wails, each note taunting them. "Let us move," Jason barked, his voice edged with desperation, his eyes darting around as if expecting the shadows to reach out for him. Alice felt his urgency, but the weight of dread was a heavy fog engulfing her mind. They surged forward, legs pumping, adrenaline coursing through their veins. But just as they reached the perimeter of the light, a shadow lunged from behind a tree with a ferocious snap, seizing Jake by the ankle. He fell, grabbing onto the roots in a futile attempt to pull himself free. "Help! I can't!" His voice shattered into raw panic. "Jake!" Claire screamed, already turning back, but Alice felt a cold grip around her heart. They couldn't stop. Panic clawed at her throat. We can't help him. Don't you dare leave me," Jake shouted, his voice a mixture of rage and fear. That Alice's instincts battled against each other. Stay with her friend or follow the light that promised a chance at survival. And then she understood. The darkness thrived on their fear like a feast, feeding hungrily on their dread and division. It would consume Jake if they hesitated. "Jason, we have to go?" Alice yelled, pulling Claire away with her. "Keep moving," Jason echoed, his voice a beacon, despite the chaos surrounding them, but it was too late. The shadows tightened their noose, rising from the ground, a writhing mass that swallowed Jake's cries. He didn't flail. He just vanished, pulled into the waiting dark, leaving behind only the echo of his terror. "There's nothing we can do," Alice choked out, while rising again at the thought. The faces of her friends twisted in the glow of the light. It felt less like safety and more like a sick joke. That as they ran, branches scraped against their skin, sharp as knives, terror spilling into the air. The entity behind them bulged and writhed, a grotesque figure of pure malice that seemed to sense their weakening resolve. The ground beneath their feet began to shift, the earth alive with malignant energy. They stumbled forward, hearts pounding, when suddenly everything went silent. It felt like the world held its breath. A strangled whisper echoed through the trees, spreading chills from head to toe. "You couldn't save him, you one-T, save yourselves." Fear twisted within Alice, squeezing her chest. What had she done? The taste of regret mingled with the acrid air. They had abandoned Jake. They were leaving him to suffer alone. With renewed desperation, Alice grabbed Jason's arm. "We can't let this thing take anyone else. We have to fight back." But Jason's face was pale. "Fight. It feeds on our fear, Alice. We can't show it weakness. You think that's a choice? We can't just keep running." Claire interjected, her voice quaking. "What if there's a way to turn this against it?" As they stumbled deeper into the woods, Alice's thoughts raced. What did the entity want? Not just their fear, but their unity? Could they find strength in each other? Each step fueled her resolve. She recalled something Jason had said before, a whisper of hope. "The light within us shines brighter than the shadows around." But the shadows were no longer just behind them. They were ahead, and with each decision they made, they moved closer to a precipice they could not see. Then, just as their breath began to stabilize, the shadows shifted once again. The dark parts of the woods took on a new shape, revealing a gaping maw of twisted roots and insatiable hunger. "We can't go back now," Alice said, dread flooding her tone. There it was, an unexpected truth. The woods were alive, and their only hope might lie within. "Stay close," Jason whispered, darkness still choking the air. They pressed on, inching towards the unknown. But then, the ground shook violently, and Alice stumbled as a chilling howl ripped through the stillness, sending vibrations through her bones. What had they awakened? Ahead lay a great clearing, a stark contrast of chaos. In the center, a pulsating figure loomed, its laugh echoing through the spectral woods. "Welcome to my feast," it sneered, eyes locked on them as they stood, frozen. Alice's breath hitched. How could they combat something that thrived on fear itself? With steely determination, she uttered the words that might change everything. but time was slipping through their grasp. What awaited them in the clearing? Would they confront their deepest fears, or would they become part of the shadows lingering in the veil? The ground trembled beneath Alice's feet as the pulsating figure spread its shadowy limbs like a monstrous web, obscuring the faint light that still flickered behind them. Jason, Claire, and Alice shared a quick glance, their eyes wide and filled with an unspeakable mix of fear and determination. They were cornered now, and there was no escape from what lurked in that clearing. "Stay together," Jason urged, his voice barely above a whisper, but as they gathered close, Alice felt a sliver of warmth from their connection. It was fragile, yet it pulsed with defiance, just like the fleeting light they had held onto in their panic. "Do you think it can read our minds?" Claire's voice trembled as she flitted her gaze from Alice to the figure. "What if it knows our fears?" The figure, a grotesque amalgamation of twisted limbs and shadowy tendrils, grinned cruelly. "Oh, I know you," it said, its voice like blades scraping against glass. "Every secret, every fear has found its way to my ears." Alice felt a shiver race through her body at its words. How could it know the darkness that haunted each of them? She remembered Jake's frantic screams, guilt pulling at her heart. "What do you want from us?" she shouted, forcing herself to stand taller against the insufferable dread. The darkness shifted, and Alice swore it was laughing. "You've brought me your fears, but I crave your unity. Painful choices give rise to true strength," it hissed, each word slithering into the air. "Embrace your despair, and I shall grant you power." With every breath, Alice felt the shadows nibbling away at her courage. She started to step back, urging Jason and Claire with slight movements, yet they stood firm. They wouldn't break apart, not now. Behind Jason's eyes, she saw a flicker of hope that had been dimmed by their encounter. "Wait," Claire said suddenly. "What if we confront this together?" "What do you mean?" Alice looked to her, panic seeping through her grasp on their fleeting confidence. "If it feeds on fear, we have to face what it brings out in us. We can't let it consume us." Claire's voice grew stronger. "Together, we can fight back." Jason nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on Alice. "We need to face our regrets. If we let that thing know it can't bind us in fear, it loses its grip." Alice's heart quickened. "But what if we're wrong? Then we stand together against whatever it throws at us." Claire interrupted, her declaration a lifeline that pulled them closer. Taking a deep breath, Alice gathered her courage, the spark of possibility igniting like fireworks against the encroaching darkness. "Okay, on three, we name our fears." "Three." They echoed together, and Alice clenched her fist, feeling the tangle of nerves. But there was a newfound strength in the trio. "I'm afraid of losing you," she shouted, her heart pounding like a drum. "Of letting fear tear us apart." "No more hiding," Jason added. Each word he uttered carried the weight of his despair. "I fear never being brave enough to face the truth before it's too late." Claire stepped forward, the light shining brighter as she declared, "I'm afraid of being alone in dark places, but I won't let it take us." The shadows twisted in anger, wavering at their defiance. "Foolish children," the figure screeched, as if their words were physical strikes against its insidious essence. With that declaration, the pulsing began to ebb, the shadows shrinking back as the warmth of their unity pushed against the overwhelming darkness. Yet, even as the creatures splintered and writhed, a guttural roar thundered above their voices, shaking the very trees around them. "Do you think you can escape me?" it bellowed, fury boiling over in waves. "Yes," Alice shouted, the fire inside her rising. "We are more than our fears." In that moment, the shadows recoiled, creating fissures in their form. The air vibrated with energy, and as the darkness flared and twisted, Alice knew they had awakened some unseen force. But they needed to channel it and push forward. Their time was limited. "Now, to the light," Jason yelled, pulling them together as they raced towards the remnants of their flickering hope. It was a narrow path illuminated amidst overwhelming shadow, but they charged ahead, their unity becoming their beacon. As they sprinted toward the edge of darkness, another figure emerged from the shadows, this one familiar, with an aura that shone through the darkness. Alice's breath caught in her throat at the sight. "Help us!" she screamed, recognizing the face now desperately illuminated against the encroaching dark. But just as the figure reached out, the ground erupted with chaos. Alice stumbled, the fleeting light flickering furiously. "Who are you?" she gasped, feeling the shadows trying to pull her back. "Do you believe?" the figure asked, its voice echoing through the misty veil. Panic flooding back Alice's mind whirled. What if this was just another trick, just another way to ensnare them deeper into the darkness? The shadows howled in fury, but was it fear they felt? Or something else? "Believe in us," Jason shouted, desperation punctuating his voice. Their very existence depended on it. The weight of their fears pressed down around them as shadows danced, waiting hungrily for a flicker of weakness. Would they break through that final layer of darkness together? Or would they surrender, becoming one with the very shadow that threatened to swallow them whole? The clearing pulsed ominously as the shadows swirled around them, thick with uncertainty. What lay beyond the grasp of fear? Would they find salvation, or everything lost to the encroaching dark? Alice could barely hear the figure's voice over the roar of the wind that whipped around them. But somehow, its question echoed in her mind. "Do you believe?" "Believe in what?" she shouted back, struggling against the overwhelming pull of the darkness. Every instinct told her to flee, yet they were still bound to that courage they had summoned. "Believe that you can overcome this," Jason insisted, his grip tightening around her hand. His voice, firm yet strained, cut through the dim chaos that clung to them like a second skin. "We can't let it win." Then, Claire's voice broke through as well, her urgency galvanizing Alice. "It's trying to confuse us. It feeds on uncertainty. Stop thinking, just feel." Suddenly, the air shifted. The shadows began to pulse wildly, swirling like a tornado ready to unleash its fury. The creature's snarls mixed with the howling wind, creating a cacophony of dread that reverberated in Alice's chest. Tendrils of darkness clawed at her legs, coaxing her to submit. But surrender wasn't an option. "Not now. I believe," Alice shouted, conviction lacing her words. "I believe in us." As if her resolve lit a match in the night, a wave of warmth surged through their linked hands. The shadows recoiled, as if scalded, the figure in front of them shrieking in disbelief. "You think mere belief can save you? You are all still so fragile." For a moment, Alice felt the ground beneath her shift, the soft earth threatening to swallow them whole. But they stood together, the gravity of their fears forging an unbreakable connection. In that unyielding bond, Alice found her true strength blossoming. And then it happened, the shadows began to dissolve, revealing a flicker of light at their core. The warmth expanded, pouring forth like a flood, illuminating not just their surroundings, but also the depths of their hearts. "Now, use it," Jason shouted, his voice rising above the chaos as he pushed against the darkness with all his might. "Focus on each other. Push through." The air buzzed with electric energy, lifting Alice off her feet. She felt it surging inside her, a radiant heat. "Let us drive it away," she yelled, feeling the pulse of their unity vibrate through her bones. Together, they took a step forward, the light intensifying with each minute of clarity. The shadows shrieked, surging back like water against an incoming tide, yet the trio forged on, becoming a torrent of luminescence and determination. "Fear is just a shadow of misunderstanding. We won't let you win," Claire called, her voice ringing true as they surged forward together, the brightness seeping into the darkness. The figure writhed in agony, twisting its distorted form in a frantic attempt to resist the light. "You'll pay for this," it roared, an echo of malice that seemed to shake the very air around them. But Alice felt no fear. Instead, she felt power, the power of connection, of facing their darkness together. Then, in one shuddering breath, they propelled themselves into the heart of the light. Brightness enveloped them, blinding yet purifying, washing over their fear like a cleansing wave. And just like that, the darkness splintered, exploding outward in an eruption of shadow, twisting itself into 1,000 desperate wisps before dissolving into nothingness. As silence replaced the tumult, Alice fell to her knees, gasping for air. They were alive. The clearing around them had transformed. Where foreboding shadows had loomed, now stood a serene expanse of light, vibrant and peaceful. But even in that moment of triumph, unease gnawed at Alice. Something wasn't quite right. In the quiet, she could almost hear whispers on the edge of her consciousness, little remnants of fear clinging stubbornly, like thorns on a rose. Then she felt a chill creeping up her spine, a sense of being watched. As she stood up to look around, the familiar figure that had reached out for them was gone, replaced instead by the trees that loomed larger, almost sinister in the bright light. What just happened? She whispered, heart racing, scanning their surroundings for threats. Had they truly won, or was this a mere trick of the light? Jason and Claire shared a look filled with uncertainty. I don't know, Jason said slowly, but we need to keep moving. If that thing has another trick up its sleeve. Suddenly, time seemed to freeze. A flicker of movement caught Alice's eye, a dark shadow flitting behind the trees, just at the edge of the clearing. What was that? Claire gasped, her face pale as she squinted into the distance. Alice felt her pulse quicken. Shadows were not gone. They lingered, more elusive than before. A foreboding dread settled deep within her. Everyone stay close, Jason urged, his voice firm, yet laced with anxiety. They couldn't let their guard down. We can't let it take us again. As they stepped cautiously away from the clearing, the air thickened with tension once more. Alice couldn't shake the feeling that whatever darkness had hounded them was still lurking, waiting for the perfect moment to strike again. And as the wind whipped around them, she realized the battle was far from over. What other horrors awaited them in the woods? Would they still find the strength to face what was yet to come? The air crackled with tension as Alice, Jason, and Claire moved cautiously through the woods, eyes darting at every shadow that flickered in the corner of their vision. Whatever darkness they had encountered wasn't gone. It thrummed below the surface like a predator observing its prey, waiting for the right moment to pounce. The trio pressed on, determination waning in the face of uncertainty. What if it comes back? Claire whispered, her voice trembling as they tread deeper into the forest. The trees loomed overhead, gnarled branches intertwining like fingers forming a cage around them, every creak sounding like a whisper of warning. It won, Jason said, forcing confidence into his tone despite the doubt pooling in his gut. We faced it before. Together. But even as he said the words, the fleeting doubts washed over Alice like waves crashing against the shore. She felt the remnants of fear, little stitches where pain and vulnerability intertwined. But their shared bravery bound them tighter. As they ventured further, Alice sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The air grew colder, an unsettling chill crawling across her skin, reminding her of the very entity they had fought to escape. We need to find a way out, she said, urgency sparking in her voice. I think I see something through the trees, Jason pointed, his heart racing. There, in the distance, a faint light flickered like a beacon, pulsing rhythmically. Hope surged through Alice, but right behind it came fear. What if it was another trap? With trepidation, they approached the light, each pulse seeming to beat in rhythm with their racing hearts. But as they closed the distance, Alice stumbled upon something unexpected, a clearing, vast and soothing, yet eerily quiet. The flickering light hung above a weathered stone pedestal, carved with strange runes that seemed to shimmer as they drew closer. What is this? Claire murmured, moving tentatively closer. With every step, the air vibrated around them, thick as molasses, as if laden with secrets waiting to be uncovered. Maybe it's a portal, suggested Jason, eyes wide with intrigue. Something to help us escape. But Alice felt a knot in her stomach. Something about this place felt too still, too quiet. They had fought darkness before, and yet here they stood, as if lured into a trap wrapped in an illusion of safety. That thing can't hurt us if we don't let it, Alice insisted, drawing on their earlier strength. But we need to be united. Trust the bond we've built. It's stronger than any shadow. Jason and Claire nodded, their faces reflecting resolve. They held hands, forming a tight circle, pulses synchronizing as the faint glow above illuminated their fearful yet united spirits. They needed to find a way to confront whatever could still loom in the darkness. What should we do? Claire asked, uncertainty creeping back into her voice. Maybe we need to push back the shadows, Alice suggested, squeezing their hands tighter. We need to face our fears, just like we did before. We should concentrate, feel the fear, and then let it wash away, Jason added, nodding to Alice's previous words. Then we focus on that light. Okay, on 3, Claire agreed, the flickering glow catching in her tears. 1, 2, 3. I'm afraid. Alice took a deep breath, of never being brave enough to lead us through the dark. Their fears spilled out, a floodgate opening as vulnerability finally chimed through them. I fear losing you both, Jason continued, each word releasing pent-up anxiety and guilt, like letting out air from a balloon. I never want to see you hurt again. I fear stepping into the unknown, Claire whispered, but I'd rather face it with you both than hide in the dark. With each admission, the shadows around them began to slink back, their power diminishing under the wave of light that flooded the clearing. The pedestal glowed brighter, colors swirling like shapes in a dream, pushing back against the surrounding gloom. It was in that moment Alice understood. They weren't merely fighting against darkness, they were rising above it. Feel the light, Alice shouted as warmth surged from the pedestal in radiant waves, pushing against the darkness pressing in. It will not take us. The shadows shrieked, writhing and twisting like snakes at her words, each wave of brightness ripping through them like sunlight cutting through a fog. Together, Jason shouted, their shared strength empowering each pulse of light, pushing the darkness further back. The shadows crumbled into dust, dissipating like whispers on the wind, their presence reduced to a mere memory as silence enveloped them. The clearing suddenly felt different, safer, brighter. Standing at the center, they breathed in the crisp air, shockwaves of relief coursing through each of them. We did it, Claire whispered, tears glistening, now mingling with joy rather than fear. But then, just as her words settled, movement at the edge of the clearing flickered in the corner of Alice's eye. She spun around, heart racing, but it was gone, just a flash of shadow, nothing more. Did you see that? Alice murmured, her newfound courage tinged with hesitation. But it's gone now, Jason reassured, gripping Alice's hand tighter. We are stronger than before. We can move on. And as they turned away from the remnants of their fear, taking their first steps into the welcoming light, Alice whispered under her breath, light will always triumph over darkness. Yet even as she said it, an echo of doubt lingered, a gentle reminder that darkness has a way of creeping back. They would never stop watching, never stop running. But they would always stand together, facing whatever came next, side by side. As they crossed the threshold, the last tendrils of darkness dissipated, the silhouettes finally fading into the past. The woods behind them may have thrived under the weight of unspeakable terrors, but for Alice, Jason, and Claire, no longer would they be prey. They had transformed, forever changed by what they faced. Together, they had conquered the shadows, and steps echoed in the silence, steadying their resolve as they ventured toward a new dawn, a place where light flourished, inviting them forward, carrying the promise of tomorrow. But as they walked, the whispers of the forest softly sighed through the trees, a haunting reminder etched into their hearts. The darkness was no longer an unknown. It was a part of their story, and though they triumphed today, Alice could never shake the feeling that the shadows still lingered, waiting for the next moment of fear to rekindle their twisted dance. As they moved forward, hand in hand, each heartbeat echoed a challenge. The challenge was not in the absence of darkness, but in the unwavering belief that together, they could face whatever shadows came next. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss future exclusive stories. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this conclusion, and instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this ending. Don't wait even one more second to share.